Good morning, everybody. I have the pleasure and honor to introduce Sheryll Durrant of Kelly Street Garden. Her talk will be growing communities, growing food. I could be here all day just to talk about her, but I won't. What I will say is that she is a Farm School alum, a proud member of her community, as well as a proud member of Peas and Justice, a collective of urban agriculture leaders promoting racial justice and equity in our work and here for the people. So without further ado, my wonderful friend, Sheryll Durrant.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. All right. So today I'm going to do a little talk on growing communities and growing food. And when we look at the definition of community, it states a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. And all of us in this room know that food is a commonality that we all share. It doesn't matter how we grow it. It doesn't matter how we prepare it. It doesn't matter how we eat it. We all need food to survive, or our bodies struggle to function. And food and community is so intertwined, something we have forgotten in our hyper-individualized capitalist society. We're so busy fending for ourselves, or we are forced to make that such a priority that we have become disconnected from each other. In our cities, in our workplace, in our neighborhoods, and even within our own families. But think about all the times when we do come together in the spirit of community with people that we know and sometimes people that we don't even know. How many times is food at the center of that gathering? The family barbecue, the wedding, the funeral, the potluck, the birthday party, after work with our colleagues, holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving, for better or worse. Even sitting around the cafeteria having lunch with our schoolmates. Food is always at the center of these gatherings and celebrations, and there's always this sense of well-being that we have, this sense of belonging to a group. All of that is community. And we can even go further back and look at how earlier societies were structured. Hunter-gatherers, these societies were structured around foraging, collecting plants, pursuing animals, and later on in early agricultural societies where we learned how to domesticate plants and animals. Communities were built around farming and food. And what arose from these societies were language, art, culture, later our economic and political structures. And now we fast forward to today, where we are far away from that core, where most people don't know where their food comes from, who grows it, and sometimes even how it is prepared. So why am I talking about this? Because in my work, I'm sure, and in the work of a lot of you that sit in the audience, we see how food and community are connected, and we see how we can use the power of food to reestablish and reinvigorate our communities. And don't get me wrong, it is easier to say to your friends, let's go out and have a drink, than it is to say, let's start a community garden and expect that everyone on the block is going to be excited and come and join you and make it happen. But you can use food as the jump-off point in that conversation. And I know many of you have stories about working in your community gardens or urban farms, and there's always someone that takes a trip down memory lane. There's that person that remembers as a child growing food with their parents or their grandparents, or that they grew up on a farm in the South or in their own country. That is your entry point to begin community engagement. I remember working with a community member that had never been to the garden before, and he started reminiscing about how he grew food with his grandfather and what they grew. And by the time our conversation ended, we were planning a poetry slam and a farm-to-table event to raise funds for the garden. So yes, food can be a spotlight to elevate and connect us to other opportunities, to engage community members that we normally don't see. But let us get back to some basics. Most of us grow food in our gardens and urban farms because there's a need that exists. The lack of access to affordable, clean, fresh, healthy produce, coupled with that there are many communities that are tackling serious health and environmental issues. And we create and develop these spaces because we must. And we rely on volunteer efforts of our neighbors to make that happen. And this is where the speech ends and I wing it. So I'm gonna talk about how I got involved in food and what I do in my work and how I see growing communities and growing food connect to each other. So I started growing food in 2007, and one of the first projects that I became involved with was developing a healing herb garden in my community in Flatbush. And it's interesting because one of the first things that I think you need to do when you develop food projects is not to do it in a silo or do it in a vacuum, but always take into consideration your community. So this was a collaboration with people. Flatbush is a diverse neighborhood. We have all different types of immigrant populations living there. And the community garden was developed because people in the community not only expressed an interest in reconnecting with herbs, but they also wanted to see their own herbs, things that they were connected to, growing in this garden. So we got a lot of advice. We didn't get a lot of volunteers that actually showed up to help build the garden, but we got a lot of people telling us what they wanted to see, and that is okay. So we built this garden, and in our neighborhood, we also had an apothecary, a local apothecary run by an immigrant from Guyana. And so we partnered with them, and we decided that let's take this a step further and develop a collaboration between the community and the apothecary to teach people how to use plant medicine for health and wellness. And through this collaboration, we developed free community workshops. And the first workshop that we had centered around women's health. And even though we advertised this workshop in our community, I didn't expect that many people to show up. But our first workshop, we had about 30 people show up to that workshop. And then our second workshop, which was a need in our community, people in our community wanted to connect with herbs in taking care of their elderly parents. And at that workshop, we had about 120 people show up to that workshop because the need was there. And what we realized was that in our community, a lot of our community members took care of their elderly parents at home. And the countries that they come from and the way in which they took care of their parents was through food and through herbs as medicine. So we've continued these workshops today. Another project or another thing that I've been involved in is Farm School NYC, and that's another community where people from all walks of life came together to learn about growing food and learn about food justice and sovereignty, because they wanted to go out into their own communities and even other communities to bring this work to them and collaborate with people in their own community to bring about access to food and more food sovereignty. And I see all my friends who have graduated with me from Farm School actually engaged in very vibrant opportunities and very vibrant projects that are actually walking the walk, talking the talk, and walking the walk. So now I'm in the Bronx with another great project, community project, Kelly Street Garden. And that is also another project around community engagement, because the community was asked what they wanted to see of a vacant lot that was behind 4 apartment buildings. And they said they wanted to see a community garden and they wanted to grow food. And not only do they grow food and distribute food to the community, last year from 2,500 square feet, we grew 1,200 pounds of food. That might not be a lot, but for a community garden in New York, that's a lot of food. And we grew almost 1,200 pounds of food, and we distributed it to the community. But what also comes out of this project, and this project is going into its 4th season, is that other forms of community engagement springs from that. We have community cooking workshops, and this year for the first time we had plant medicine workshops because the community members asked for those because they were wanting to address specific health issues in their neighborhood, from asthma, respiratory illness, to sleep and allergies. So the community asks for things, you engage with the community, you develop these types of projects. We partner with another organization on site called the Laundromat Project. This has nothing to do with growing food, but out of food as a jump-off point, other community endeavors operate as well. They do community-based art projects. So therefore, you have a community engaged in food, you have a community engaged in art, and this year we're trying to collaborate and say how food and art can go together. And my final project, which I'm involved with, I'm the farm coordinator at New Roots Community Farm, and it is connected to the International Rescue Committee. It's a refugee resettlement program, and we work with refugees and asylees in growing food. And what I have discovered, and this is a great touch point with refugees, because a lot of them come from countries and they have a long and deep history with farming and growing food. So they not only bring their expertise to us, we also learn from each other, and one of the projects that I'm excited to start with them this year is a seed saving project. And growing seeds that some of the refugees have brought from their homeland to grow here. So I'm totally excited by doing that. So these projects and all these things that I've been involved with is just a way to say that I like to look at food as a gateway drug to all things good. And because food is what connects all of us, I think in this room, since we're all here for the Just Food Conference, is to think about deeper ways and more and other ways in which we can use food to build out our communities and to engage and to do more community engagement, which is not only just connected to food. And that's it. Thank you very much. So before I leave the stage, I want to introduce my friend and colleague, Ali Jacobs. And if anybody knows the relationship between myself and Ali Jacobs, everybody in Farm School calls her my farm wife. We work very closely together. We graduated from Farm School NYC. She's now the harvest manager at Red Fire Farms in Massachusetts. Prior to that, she was in New York for many, many years, doing other projects, working with Brooklyn Grange, Maple Street Garden. Yep, thank you. Maple Street Garden. Yes, look up Maple Street Garden. That's real action in land access and forcing a developer out of a neighborhood that was intended to destroy the garden and build housing. So, Ali.